This is a rather strange story, maybe. It's not a joke, it's fact. The year was 1920, and I was just then 9 years of age. Wonderful age to be. Yeah, but I'm glad I'm not 9 again. We lived in Roscommon, a place called Grange. An old thatch cottage. It was rather a nice cottage in 1920 because everybody lived in thatch cottages. Nobody was poor, nobody was rich, nobody went to bed hungry. We had a very fine neighbour there named Andrew Loftus. Rather peculiar fella, you might agree. He was very tall, I would say 6'2", 3". He wore a long jacket always, something like the real pictures of White Herb. Dark hat, long coat, 2 buttons on the back, style worn then, I believe. And this beard, this long flowing beard like Bernard Shaw. And he acted like Bernard Shaw. I don't know why the hell he did, but he did. He always used a cane. As far as I know, both his legs were the same length, but he didn't seem lame, but he had his cane. And this day, this particular day happened to be Sunday morning, and my grandmother was preparing some food for that time of day. And suddenly we had this knock on the door. I feel he knocked on the door with his cane because there wasn't any knocker there. Nobody had a knocker. And my grandmother didn't particularly care for this man, and neither did he care for her. So he came in and they eyed each other. He was offered a chair to sit down, and he said he didn't want it. He just wanted to tell my father of a strange experience he had the night before. Well, this guy had always strange experiences. So he said, I want to show you something. And come on, he said, I'll show you something here that I can't understand. And he took him outside, and I was a little lad, and I went out with him. We got out to this place. He said, can you see that little hill down there where you got these potatoes planted? And he said, yeah. Well, I was in a hotel there last night, and I had 2 glasses of whiskey. What the hell are you talking about? He says, potato field. Well, he said, I'll tell you that. He said, I went to bed about 11 o'clock and went to sleep. And later on I woke up and I had a strange muttering of noises and conversation, and I really couldn't make them out. But I looked through the window and I saw all these people milling about. They had sheep and cattle and pigs and everything. And they were buying and selling these along the little road down to this very house, your thatched house here. And suddenly I walked down to look at this strange phenomena, and right there on that little hill I see a hotel, all lit up. I couldn't understand it, so I went to see what was there. And I walked into this hotel, and it was crammed with people, and 2 ladies came forward and they gave me each a glass of whiskey. I took this whiskey and I drank it, and then I decided to have 1 or 2 more because he was fond of whiskey, this character was. But I discovered I had no money. So I went back. The first 2 glasses were free, so I went back to my house to get some change, which I did, returned for more whiskey, and the scene had vanished. There was no hotel, there was no people, there was no market, there was absolutely nothing. So I went back to bed. I just thought that I would tell you this story to my father. And he said, someday you'll see something there. And with that he turned on his heel and walked away. So my father didn't pay any attention to his story, and neither did any other body. And it was a forgotten thing because he did say funny things from time to time. About 6 months later, maybe 7, I don't know exactly the time, one of my aunts came from Philadelphia, and we had a jaunting car and a horse, and my father went to the station to meet her. At that time there was war, a little war with England. Ireland more or less has been at war with England for 700 years. Not serious wars, but wars nevertheless. So we picked her up at the railroad station and took her back home. And she looked at the thatched cottage and all about it, and she said to my father, Pat, I've brought you some good news. John and Michael want to build a house for you, and I'm entrusted with this money. And she handed him over £600 sterling. Now my father was kind of nervous, especially when he saw a pound. At this time he was drinking tea. He had his cup, and he got so nervous when he saw the £600, he got 600 times more nervous. Consequently, he broke the handle off the cup. My grandmother was annoyed because I think that was the only cup in the house that had a handle. However, he couldn't get over the shock, neither could my mother. He couldn't believe this thing. And he said, I'm sure they can't afford this money, but she said to him, of course they can. They spend more money on gas over in Philadelphia than would buy a house for you. So the thing got started, and my uncle in Galway, my father's brother, came down and he overseed the thing a bit. So they got an engineer and they got a contractor and they started to build this house right on this very spot that this man had seen 9 months maybe before that. The house was built after a lot of struggles, and then nobody would move into it. So my both uncles came from Philadelphia and their wives. 2 years later, when the house was complete, they came over and the opening came and we all moved in with a lot of excitement and tears and crying after this old thatched cottage. We moved in. Now the funny thing about it, all the neighbours gathered. They had whiskey, and they had Mountain whiskey, and they had every damn thing in Guinness, and a record machine, and I didn't quite know what the hell it was. And the thing was in full swing. And suddenly, about 10 o'clock, maybe 11, this Mr. Loftus walked through the door, still with his cane. And as he walked into the front living room, on the left-hand side of the front door, they had a corner of the room which was would you call it a server or whatever, and the bottles of whiskey were all laid out, that wine for the women. You know, the women wouldn't drink whiskey because they were afraid to go to hell, so they had wine for them. But my mother, God rest her soul, and also my aunt from Philadelphia, each went forward with a glass of whiskey at the same time to this man. And he took both glasses of whiskey and he called my father to witness this. This happened 3 years ago, and now it has come to pass. That's a strange story, wouldn't you agree? There's only two cultures now. Personally, the Southern England, they're really believing. And then, brought the Roman Catholic Church. The older woman told that she wasn't because she was scared. No way. Because they feel that all these people have into it if you would hear that. Sit down and get in this picture. Oh, right. You know, is that camera working now? Yeah. This fella now, Jimmy, from Philadelphia, yes, he doesn't believe in anything he hears and only half of what he sees. And he thinks that everybody over here is a gang of liars. Yeah, the wind, that could be ghosts anyway. It didn't break. I've never seen a ghost in my life.
No, no. You saw maybe.
Well, I've always met somebody that did see one.
Did see? Oh yes.
Well, I've never seen any ghosts, any worse than myself.
Yeah.
There was things that I couldn't understand, and that's not too difficult for me to not to be able to understand things. No. I can understand damn little, but I know that we were frightened in the dark when I was a kid, and there was darkness every place.
Yes.
There was no light. But you hear all these stories about ghosts and everything else, and we were scared, and we were told, we were kids, that the hairy man was outside, and
That's right.
the hairy man and this guy and every other body was outside and everything else. And we were scared, we went to bed. I've heard a lot of stories.
Oh, yes.
And the stories, I'm not talking about stories I read a kid in the hair. I'm talking about stories I was told when I was a kid or a young lad before I went away at 16 and a half, that had stories in Cornwall, and I heard them in Wales and down in south of England and over in the Philadelphia and all over the place and up in the upstate Pennsylvania, because any place that was Irish and Scotch and Welsh, English, they brought these stories from home, and they told you they saw these things, but they didn't, because it's like traditional Irish music. It was handed down from father to son. But I was down in Cornwall this time, and this fella told me he saw his great-grandfather in the mine. He was a tin miner, and I said, well, how did you know he was your great-grandfather? He said, well, I saw his picture. I saw his picture, and he said he was there, and he warned me, and I got over the mine. He said, and that night there was an explosion, and I survived. But I remember a man telling me about a horse they had in Ireland, and it was in pit. And people in the west of Ireland were, well, they were as good as any other one, but they were poor through no fault of their own. Years ago, and they had this horse, and they used to feed him, and he used to do the work. He did the ploughing, and he brought home the turf for them, and took the pigs to the market or whatever. And suddenly the horse got sick and died, and it was a terrible loss, because they had no transport of any kind.
It was an awful, no man of kind that time. There was few.
And he said to his family, well, I don't know what we're going to do. It was harvest time. So he said, and they want to get in the oats and barley on the fields. And they were sitting by the fire. There was a great, well, it was a religious affair. They said that they used to kneel down at night, every night at 10 o'clock, and say these prayers called the Rosary, and they believed in it. And they did, and when they finished saying this, they heard this noise outside the door, and he said it was a moonlight night. No, I don't know. I wasn't there.
This man was telling you this?
He was telling me this at where my father used to go playing cards. There was one gang at the table playing cards.
Is it here you have this?
No, in Grange.
Oh, Tom, you have Grange. Oh, yeah.
There was one gang around the table playing cards. 9 of them. Used to pay 6pence apiece to pay for a goose.
Oh, yes.
Or a pig's head or something like that.
Yes, they used to be at that.
And there was a few more old farmers. They were all more farmers. They were around the fire talking about land and bogs and where the drain should be made in the bockhole and drain it off. And there was another gang over here selling ghost stories. And he was telling us a story, and he said they heard the noise, and he said that's like the horse walking outside. And when he opened the door and he went to the back door and he looked out, there was the horse. And he buried the horse the week before that. And the horse was standing there.
Christ, does he disappear again?
No, he just looked at the horse and he patted his head and he said he was there.
And the horse did a week?
The horse, he buried him a week before this.
Oh, jeez.
He talked to the horse anyway, and this horse used to like an apple or something. They had some apple trees and they gave him a bit of an apple, and he said to the wife and the kids, let's get together and yoke this horse. Because he was only concerned about getting his oats in and his barley stacked into the garden. And he took the horse and he put the tacklings on the horse and yoked him to the cart. And they was out at 11 o'clock at night, the moon was shining, and they gathered all the oats in.
Yes. Oh, Christ.
And everything into the garden. He was that scared because he had no ways to get it in if the weather broke.
Oh, he was that scared, I can open it now, I see now. Like he didn't give a damn what you get it in.
That's right. So he took it. He said, no, I don't know, the man is gone, I hope he's happy, but if he told me a lie, he'd have told it. So they got all this in, and he said to his wife, go in and get a half a bucket of warm water and a bit of oatmeal and give it to the horse.
Yes. Oh,
and she went in, when they had the work done, and she came out with this bucket, and he went to give it the horse. There was no horse. Now where was the horse?
They put in the hay,
they put in the oats and everything else.
With the oats.
But the horse had disappeared. There was no horse.
Christ.
Now he said I was right. Now, that's the end of the story about that as far as I'm concerned. But what was it? Was he telling lies? Or did it happen?
Did it happen? My God.
But he got his oats in. And that's it.